Welcome back, and thank you for joining me for another chapter in this series. In part 3 of Famous Warship Damage Photos, we once again look beyond the image itself, into the battle, the crew, and the real story frozen in a single moment of history. Moments when war tested steel. USS Missouri was one of the last and greatest battleships ever built. Launched in 1944, she belonged to the Iowa class, fast, heavily armored, and armed with 9 16-inch guns capable of striking targets more than 20 miles away. Combining speed, firepower, range, and modern fire control systems, Missouri and her sisters could do what few battleships ever managed: keep pace with fast carrier fleets while still carrying the punch of a traditional battle line. One could argue that the Iowa-class ships were perhaps the greatest battleships ever built. Her captain during this famous moment was William M. Callahan, a calm and respected officer known for discipline, professionalism, and steady leadership under pressure. By April 1945, Missouri was operating off Okinawa, where the Japanese had turned increasingly to suicide attacks in an effort to slow the Allied advance. Kamikaze pilots came in low, fast, and often through heavy anti-aircraft fire, hoping to cripple ships through sheer sacrifice. On the 11th of April, 1945, one of those aircraft broke through the defensive screen and came directly at Missouri. In this famous photograph, the Japanese plane is only moments away. It skims low across the sea beside the battleship, wings level, nose pointed toward the starboard side as anti-aircraft guns fire around it. Crewmen can be seen at their stations, some still tracking the target, others bracing for what they know may come next. Seconds later, the aircraft struck the ship near the main deck on the starboard side. Because of the angle of impact and Missouri's heavy armor, the damage was far less than the pilot intended. Fire broke out, debris scattered across the deck, and several sailors were injured, but the battleship remained fully operational. In another photograph taken afterward, a machine gun from the destroyed aircraft can be seen impaled upon one of Missouri's 40mm anti-aircraft barrels, a strange and vivid reminder of how violent the collision had been. Yet the story did not end with the impact. Captain Callahan ordered that the body of the Japanese pilot be recovered and given a burial at sea with full military honors. For some aboard, the decision was controversial. For Callahan, it was simpler than that. One fighting sailor would honor another. The pilot had come as an enemy, but he had found death with unquestioned resolve. So, amid the chaos of war, Missouri's crew committed him to the sea with military honors. Even in war, courage would be recognized by great men sent to defeat it. USS Franklin was an Essex-class fleet carrier, launched in 1943 and crewed by more than 3,000 officers and sailors. In 1945, ships like Franklin were at the center of America's final drive toward Japan. Her commanding officer was Leslie E. Gerrys, whose crew would soon face one of the deadliest carrier disasters of the Pacific War. On the 19th of March, 1945, while operating close to the Japanese home islands, a Japanese dive bomber broke through the fleet defenses and dropped 2 bombs onto Franklin during flight operations. The timing was catastrophic. Her flight deck and hangar spaces were crowded with armed and fueled aircraft preparing to launch. Within seconds, gasoline fires erupted. Bombs, rockets, and ammunition exploded in chain reactions that tore through the carrier. Men were killed instantly. Others were trapped below decks, and some were blown overboard. Smoke filled passageways as fire spread through the ship. In this famous photograph, Franklin leans heavily in the water, smoke still rising as hundreds of men crowd her sloping flight deck. The image was taken after the worst of the explosions had passed, when many survivors had escaped the inferno below and gathered topside while the carrier still burned. Some stand in silence. Others sit where they can, exhausted, burned, or wounded. Many shipmates are no longer with them. In total, 807 sailors were killed, while hundreds more were injured, many of whom carried wounds for the rest of their lives. At points during the disaster, sections of the carrier were effectively abandoned as men were forced upward or into the sea to escape the heat. Damage control parties, engineers, and surviving crew fought for hours. Against all expectation, the carrier remained afloat and was brought home. She survived because her crew did not give up. HMS Sussex was one of the Royal Navy's counterclass heavy cruisers, a London subclass vessel built for long-range service across the sea lanes of a global empire. She entered service in 1929, a ship of the interwar fleet, elegant in profile, heavily armed, and designed to operate far from home waters. At over 630 feet long, Sussex carried the reach and confidence of a navy still expected to be everywhere at once. Before the Second World War, she had already seen demanding service. Sussex operated in the Mediterranean, spent time attached to the Royal Australian Navy, and later patrolled during the Spanish Civil War, where British warships guarded merchant traffic in tense and uncertain seas. When war came in 1939, her duties only grew harder. She served in the Atlantic, joined Force H, and later moved east to the Indian Ocean with the Eastern Fleet. She hunted enemy raiders, escorted convoys, and crossed waters where danger could come from the horizon or from beneath it. By 1945, the war in the Pacific had taken on a darker form. Aircraft were now being used as weapons themselves. In July that year, while operating off Sumatra, Sussex became the target of a Japanese kamikaze pilot diving low toward the cruiser. Many ships struck in this way had burned fiercely, been crippled, or gone down entirely. Sussex came within moments of joining them. In this famous photograph, the side of Sussex bears the strange mark of that attack, the hull scarred where the aircraft struck. There are no towering flames, no ship sinking beneath the sea. Only an eerie mark in the steel. By fortune, angle, or failed detonation, the strike caused far less destruction than many feared. What could have been her final moment became only another scar. HMS Campbeltown was never meant to become a legend. She had begun life in the United States Navy as the destroyer USS Buchanan, an old Wicks class, built during the First World War. By the time the Second World War arrived, vessels like her were aging, worn, and no longer considered first-rate warships. In 1940, as Britain stood alone against Germany, the United States transferred 50 of these older destroyers to the Royal Navy under the Destroyers for Bases Agreement. Many were seen as outdated, cramped, and troublesome to maintain. Campbeltown was one of these vessels. What had once been an unwanted old destroyer would soon be chosen for one of the boldest missions of the war. By 1942, British planners had identified the Great Normandy dock at Saint-Nazaire as a critical target. It was the only dry dock on the Atlantic coast large enough to repair major German capital ships such as Tirpitz. If that dock could be destroyed, any German battleship damaged in the Atlantic would have far fewer places to run. Campbeltown was stripped down, modified to resemble a German vessel at distance, and secretly packed with delayed action explosives deep inside her hull. Her captain for the raid was Stephen Haldane Beatty, a determined and courageous officer who would later receive the Victoria Cross for his actions. On the night of the 28th of March, 1942, Campbeltown led the assault force straight into the defended harbour under intense fire. Searchlights found her, guns opened up. Yet there was no stopping now. Campbeltown rammed the caisson at speed and climbed onto the gate itself. In this famous photograph, the pink-painted, German-disguised destroyer lies jammed high upon the dock gate, her bow crushed, stranded at an angle, and appearing spent and harmless. But with German officers and sailors inspecting the wreck, the hidden charges detonated. The explosion tore apart the dock caisson, killed many nearby, and rendered the great dry dock unusable for the rest of the war. Many of the raiders were killed or captured, and Campbeltown herself was destroyed. An old, unwanted destroyer had achieved what newer ships could not. She gave her life in one of the war's most famous raids. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more ships of war. Until then, goodbye, and Godspeed.